Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Managing Changing Dynamics in Procurement. I'm your moderator, Shubhro Sen. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions during the webcast, you can type the questions using the Q&A widget on your screen. Our speaker will answer the questions at the end of the presentation. I would now like to introduce to you today's presenter. Bill Michels, CEO at Aripart Consulting, helps companies transform business strategies into maximum profit. He is a leading expert in purchasing and supply chain management. His consulting work with some of the world's greatest companies across a wide spectrum of industries and countries is helping in transforming procurement and supply chain. Well known in the purchasing and operations management community and food and pharmaceutical industries, Bill is sought after speaker and writer with many publications, including co-authorship of the book Transform Your Supply Chain. He is now working on a new book focused in the area of supplier relationship management and published numerous articles. Bill has BS in Business Administration from Rochester Institute of Technology and an MBA from Baldwin Wallace University. He has CPSM, CPM, and FCIPS certifications. He is on the board of directors with Joe Niekro Foundation. With it, I now turn over to Bill for the presentation.
Thank you, Spro. Today we're going to have some fun. I'm going to go through about 5 or 6 slides, and there's been quite a few questions that have been submitted in advance that we'll go through and answer. And if anybody in the audience has some questions, we'll be open to answer them. Again, as many of you know me, I've been in procurement and supply chain for a very, very long time, and I've worked in a lot of companies. So there's probably not very many situations or industries I haven't really thought about. So let's sit back. I'll go through my 5 or 6 slides, and then we'll get to the questions. So what I wanted to do is look at what's influencing us at the moment in terms of procurement, and where are we being impacted. So we're seeing lots of opportunities for digital disruption, and it was really interesting to go to the Zycus Horizon conference last week, because a lot of the discussions with a lot of the procurement leaders was all about artificial intelligence and how artificial intelligence is going to impact our industry, and we'll talk a little bit about that. The other piece is globalization. So we've done a lot of things in our procurement careers, and we moved from being U.S.-centric to being global, and we've chased a low-cost country labor, and now we're getting back into automation where labor is not an issue, but we still want to be close to the markets we're selling in. And our customers over time are demanding more and more value. We're seeing shorter life cycles in products. We're seeing faster turns on products. By the time I get a new product, I have to get another one because of the technology changes that are happening. So life cycles are short, product development is fast, and customers want more and more and more value. Redefining the industry, we're starting to see automation take over in manufacturing. We're seeing lights out factories, and that's impacting the way we work. And the future of work is going to change too. So we'll talk a little bit about how will the purchasing career change over the next 5 to 10 years. Very, very big emphasis on managing the planet, which is, the environmental, the social responsibility, corporate social responsibility, and the impact that's going to have on us in the future. And of course, the demographics. We have 4 different generations in the workforce. One generation is now exiting, and new generations are coming in, and that's going to change the way we work too, because the demographics are different. People want to be in urban cities. They're not buying cars, and that'll change the way we work as well. So those are just a couple of the things that impact us as we go forward. The other thing we're seeing that a lot of the supply chains that we work with are starting to consolidate. More and more and more, they're going to fewer and fewer and fewer, and we're driving a very, very big changes in the supply chain. We're starting to see competing tied supply chains where the supply chain is all working together, and we're having competing supply chains work across. All right? And when we get these very, very tight competing supply chains, and in our supply chain, we're actually starting to integrate that supply chain with business systems. We're integrating the purchase-to-pay system. Things are more automated, and we're now looking at what's going to happen when blockchain technology comes in. And blockchain is really a sort of like a ledger in the sky. You can't change it. It'll work in inventory control. We'll have inventory control. It locks in a piece of data, and it's unchangeable. So I see currency, inventories, a whole bunch of things moving to this technology, and this is a topic on its own that we probably should discuss in the future. Then our systems are going to be linked with the Internet of Things. So if you think about the planning, we always, as procurement people, we start to think about, oh, we never have a good forecast, we never do this, we never do that. Well, when you think about linking the supply chain with the Internet of Things, every time a customer has a sale, that'll be passed along the supply chain. We'll get information real time, we'll have forecasts in real time, we'll have demand planning in real time, and it'll be a digital automation. So I think that's going to change our world as we move forward. So we're really in an exciting time where everything's changing. And again, we have to integrate our forecasting, planning, and P2P systems across in the line supply chain. So when we think about that's kind of an exciting era to be in, and an exciting time to be in the procurement side. Our customers want a lot of things from us. You know, they want always to have the low-cost producer, but they want speed to market, innovation, process improvement. They're expecting that, and they want that. They're demanding that. They really want infinite supply flexibility, shorter life cycles, sustainability, corporate social responsibility, and they want the customers to invest in capital, change. They want lower costs and extra services. So customers are becoming more and more demanding, and as we move into the future, that trend, I think, will continue. So as we look at that's what customers want, what do the CEOs want? What do CEOs want today from purchasing? Well, because of the shorter life cycles and because of the faster turns on product, they need speed to market. They want to be first in the market. They want to get competitive advantage. They want to align the supply chain with the company business plan, and they expect from procurement we're going to get innovation that brings in revenue growth. Procurement will continue to contribute to revenue growth, and we'd be measured by revenue growth. In fact, one CEO I was working with measured his team by making a performance metric of increase in share price as it relates to contribution by purchasing. So those are some of the things that CEOs are expecting. You know, our corporate strategies are going to be cost and value improvements, which will always be there. We're going to have to adapt. We're certainly going to have to understand the product offering and move with the product offering changes. We're going to have portfolio rebalancing, and we're going to have to look at organic growth and mergers and acquisitions, because I think we'll continue to see mergers and acquisitions as we move forward into the supply chain space. All right, so what we're going to see is we're going to see a continuous flow of information from the physical world to the digital world. We're going to see increased revenue and a direct connection to customers and suppliers, and marketing effectiveness and speed to market. We're going to see improved margin, cost, and quality, and greater asset efficiency, geographic effectiveness in terms of proactive risk management. We're going to see increasing value, and we're going to be looking to achieve through procurement competitive advantage. All right, so some of the questions that came in while we were advertising this thing is here's a list of questions. I'll take them from the bottom up. So one of the things that was asked is what should be the top focus area of procurement beyond cost savings? You know, that's a very interesting question, because I think when we get to looking at how we do cost analysis and how we do cost transparency and how we get a greater understanding of the supplier, we have taken margins to a point where, or we will take margins to a point where we will have a sustainable margin for a supplier. And we know what the sustainable margin is. and we won't be able to cut into it, or the suppliers won't be able to expand or buy capital or give us competitive advantage. I think we will be changing our focus from just cost reduction, really, to speed to market. I mean, if we take an industry like the pharmaceutical industry or the electronics industry, if you're first in the market, you get the market, right? So, being able to get suppliers to produce faster, meet our increasing demands, help us switch fast, that's going to be an area where metric is going to be important. Another one I think that is going to be important is two that I've mentioned in the earlier presentation: innovation capture and speed to market. Those are going to be really important. And then kind of value enhancement. Actually earlier this week, I was working in the home building industry, and while cost savings is a priority, more of a priority is making sure, if you understand the construction industry, people are not going into the construction industry. There's a labor shortage, and if you're a good procurement person and you could keep the labor on the job at the right price, and you could finish the job, then you're getting the company a return on its capital. Whereas if you're just looking for cost reduction and that house doesn't get finished because the labor's not there, it's going to cost the company a lot of money. I worked in the glass industry at one point, and it was really interesting because, the shift on every 3-5 years, the company has to rebuild its furnaces, and it has to put in new fire brick because they're melting sand, and the sand is abrasive, and it eats up the brick. And when they do, it's millions and millions and millions of dollars for a couple weeks. So the question you have to ask yourself if you're a procurement person, is it more important to get a few cents off a brick that's only going to last 3 to 4 years, or is it more important to get a brick that lasts 5 to 7 years? And I think, that value argument has to be asked. Also, when you're picking suppliers now, you're actually starting to architect the supply chain of the future. You're not just picking a tier 1 supplier. You're actually picking your supply chain. And things like corporate social responsibility is really important because you're going to have to audit the supply chain. I did a lot of work on forced labor and slavery in the supply chain. I found out that most suppliers have it. Most industries have it. And so, you're going to have a map of that supply chain to manage corporate social responsibility risk, but you're also going to have a responsibility to manage risk across the supply chain. In one of the clients I was working in, they developed that supply chain map only to find out that 3 tiers down in the supply chain, one supplier was supplying the entire industry with a component. And they had huge risk. So, and that's a case where they either had to go into business themselves or encourage someone else to go into the business. I think, when we look at the automation and we look at the opportunity for AI to be able to do RFPs, RFQs, and make recommendations on supplier after looking at all of the suppliers in across the internet, we have to ask ourselves what's left to do. And I think what's left to do is, if you're going to be in an integrated, automated supply chain, you really have to manage every link of that supply chain for value, and you're really going to have a supplier relationship management program, and you're going to support R&D. So I think that, to answer that question, what should the top focus areas be of procurement beyond cost savings? It's going to be driving value. It's going to be speed to market. It's going to be improving the products. It's also going to be revenue generation from the supply chain, and all of those things are going to come into play. So what's a great career path from procurement? We haven't had a good opportunity to have a good career path. One of the things that I have seen is that some organizations. So I was working with a very large pharmaceutical company, and purchasing was an area that everybody had to go through to get to where they're going to go, because you get the blend of commercial skills, negotiating, operating business, understanding finance. So it's a great place to be. I think that the opportunities to move on from there, I have seen 3 people move on to CEO positions, and they've done it by moving into a marketing position, first an operations position, then a marketing position, then into the C-suite. So I think procurement is a great starting point, and it's a great point to get a lot of experience. It is a good career. It's been a great career for me, but I think if you're looking to run a business ultimately, you're going to have marketing, you're going to have operations, and you're going to have to round out your experience, but procurement is the best place to start that. How long can we extract costs from suppliers? That's a good question, and I kind of hit that in the answer to the other, but let's talk about it. Right? When we're really focused on price reduction, what we get with suppliers is my turn in the barrel, your turn in the barrel. And so, suppliers try to raise the price, we try to reduce the price, and we're having this value swap. And then if we're really, really focused on it, we can actually put a pressure on suppliers to actually move down their supply chain and start to take cost out. But we're going to reach that point that I talked about before, where we understand what the margin is, we know what it is, and I think we're going to get cost savings forever. Let me say that to start with. I think we're going to get it forever. But once we know what the margin is, once we know what the cost is, we've got to change something. So we either have to change specifications, invent new specifications, or invest in capital to make things faster and using new technology. So unless we change something, we won't get the price increase, and we're going to hit a point where we understand the margin, and it is what it is. And as we get more and more consolidation in the supply chain, we're going to have to work with suppliers on changing specs, building new specs, coming up with new products, and investing capital so that we can make them better. So I think we can extract costs for quite a long time, and if we continue down a path where we're willing to work with suppliers, invest with suppliers, have suppliers invest in us, and change specifications, we can probably get cost and value forever. But one of the key things is that we're going to have to understand that we just can't bang on price. When we really attack price, we only attack the top. And if you think about it as an iceberg, right? Above the water is margin, but below the water is a whole range of costs, like quality costs, R&D costs, inventory costs, and what we need to do is work with suppliers on all those below the waterline costs in order to continue to extract costs. So I think it's quite a long time, and if you have really gotten your cost analysis skills up and you understand the cost, then you can extract costs for a long time. Given the fact that we can change specs. Next one's a harder one. How can we win the respect of stakeholders? I've worked a lot in indirect spend, and the one thing that really irritates me about indirect spend is the number of companies that actually they'll claim a savings, right? Let's say I'm working with a team and they save $1 million in maintenance parts, right? But when the CFO goes to the P&L, he doesn't see $1 million because the maintenance guy's done $1 million more maintenance. So I think what we have to do is we have to show value for starters. Somehow, I always start with very, very small wins, and I always build on those small wins until the stakeholders realize that I am adding value to them. I'm doing something that they don't have the capability to do. I'm not the purchasing police because I don't want to be the rules enforcer and stifle creativity. In fact, one of the assignments I was on, we had a task to save $30 million in indirect, and it was very interesting because a lot of the stakeholders, got on board with the product and they were doing it, but the IT stakeholders did not. And so we took the attitude with the IT stakeholders. Okay, you don't have to play, but your contribution is $5 million, and these are the rules you have to play by, the rules that everybody else is going to play by. Well, I will tell you that IT department struggled to get their $5 million. They didn't like having to follow the process, the good procurement process, which is the sourcing and the great process. And the next year, they were not as anxious to take on that task, and they were more willing to work with procurement. So I think we want to show value. We want to add value where we can. We want to start with small wins. We don't want to fight the big battles. We just want to start winning a little bit at a time. So another example in my corporate career is in the marketing area, where I had a guy that would go upstairs, meet with all the marketing people, and it was in the food industry, so that he'd make these elaborate displays for the grocery stores, and he could do it in a couple of weeks, and they loved this guy because he solved all their problems, but he probably charged them about 400% more than he needed to. And so, after a while, I started to show the marketing teams that they were really being exploited, but their problem was this guy had the creative idea. So we came to a pretty good compromise, and we said, look, here's what happens. We give him the first order, no matter what. He has the idea. He deserves the first order. We'll let him amortize any tooling costs that he has. We'll let him make pretty reasonable profit on the first order, or maybe the first or second order. But after that, he has to compete in the open market with competitive prices. And so they were happy with that because they were not changing it. They were still getting the creativity. The supplier was not so happy because he didn't like losing all that margin at the end of his first order or second order. But if he was smart, he would have cost reduced it too. So I think, in that case, we earned their respect. We didn't take their ability to get their quick, creative opportunity, and we actually added value and reduced their costs 400% in the second or third order. So everything was really great, and so it became a good relationship. The supplier knew where he stood. We were able to make a big difference, and the stakeholders were really happy because they extended the marketing budget. So there's lots of opportunities, but what I would say is pick the projects you can win at, start small, and then deliver. And don't talk. I never talk about cost reduction. It's not a word in my vocabulary. My word is always cost and value improvement, and that's a significant difference between cost reduction. Because sometimes we set the impression with the stakeholders that we will reduce cost at the cost of quality or at the cost of creativity, and we're not in that business. We're in adding more value to the thing. So start small, get small wins, and build it up. How will procurement continue to change? That's a good question. I mean, I alluded to it when I talked about the continuing consolidation of the supply chain. I alluded to it when I said that we're going to have integrated suppliers. I don't think we'll have transactional purchasing in 5 to 7 years. I do see maybe artificial intelligence looking across the internet, finding all the suppliers, popping out an RFI, sorting out the suppliers on the RFI, popping out an RFP, and making a couple recommendations that procurement will follow up on. But I do see an automation of the transactional piece of procurement. The same thing in supply chain. I do see that transactions will probably be lessened as we get the IoT transmitting across the supply chain. We have real-time information all the time. I do see that we're going to have to get really good at building supplier relationships. We got to get really good at analytical skills, and we got to get really good at financial skills. And I think we'll move from the transactional tactical impression onto a value contributor in the business. And we should too, because when you think about where purchasing fits, on some of the companies I'm working with right now, it's a minimum of 50% total cost is going out to suppliers and needs to be managed. And if you think about, I have one that's high as 75%. So it's going to get more valued. Where is the respect for procurement? That tails right into the last question. I think one of the things that we have done for too long is look at short-term cost reductions. I think we've Unfortunately, we've been tagged with a tactical transactional brush over the years that we've been. Uh, it's been what we've done. We've created that image for ourselves. When we go in, I can't tell you how many times I see procurement guys go into a meeting at the C-suite where the executive management committee, and they don't talk about things the way management wants to hear it. So when I have groups, I teach groups how to present their ideas to the senior management. One of the things that you have to do is you have to talk the language of management, and management only really cares about a couple things. If I go to a CEO with a big project, he doesn't want to know the details. He wants to know what's it going to cost, what's it going to return, and what's the risk on this project. That's really all. And we tend to talk about, well, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to have a good time, we're going to, doesn't want to know that. And the other thing is, one of the things I don't see now when I go into client organizations is there's no long-term plan. Right? A long-term plan for me is 3 years. I want to see that you've got a category plan for the short term, which is 1 year. I want to know what you're going to do in the medium term, which is 2 years. And then the third year is really it. So are you going to expand the supply base, contract the supply base? You're going to go to one supplier? You're going to change a strategic supplier and create competition? It depends on this. But we haven't talked about the language of business. We haven't presented longer-term plans. And if you're still talking about short-term cost reduction for the quarter or the year, then you're not going to get the respect. You need to be starting to talk about how are you going to drive procurement to the next level, and what are you going to do over the next 1, 2, and 3 years? How are you going to get continuous improvement? Where's the value piece going to come from? Where are you going to get the revenue generation from? How are you going to bring in innovation? And if you can't talk those things, you won't get respect. That tails into the next question. Why has procurement been ignored for so long? Well, in my view, it's because of the approach we've taken. We haven't demonstrated that we're business people. We haven't demonstrated that we have long-term strategic thinking, and we haven't really demonstrated that we could drive a strategy to a completely new level. And I think that that's part of why we've been ignored, and we don't speak the language of business. That was one of the biggest complaints. So I was a part of one of the big procurement associations, the ISM, and that was the biggest complaint that we got, is that people don't speak the language of business. They really have a problem. So if you don't know how to do finance or think about financial or put things in financial terms, it would be really good for you to boost up those skills. It's going to help you. The question is, do we have a seat on the C-suite? Currently, I think we are working our way to have a seat on the C-suite. Even though we have a lot of CPOs, they're usually a second tier down from the management executive committee or board of directors in a lot of organizations. I think that we are moving in the right direction. We're actually showing that there's lots of value to be added. We're being put into a position where we're being measured by the impact on shares. We're being measured by the impact on shareholder value. So we are working our way into that seat. I know of 3 guys that have moved from procurement to a position of 3-year of being a CEO. The first one was in charge of a food company. He saved $180 million, and he was promised to work for a business. He didn't get it, and eventually moved on to another business as the CEO, and then eventually bought his own business and is now the CEO. Another one took the company through some merger and acquisition issues and wound up at the top. So I think that we don't quite have the seat yet, but I do think that we are on our way to get the seat. And once we start moving into and a lot of the CEOs on large companies do have impact and influence on the board, and a lot of the boards of directors are recognizing that we're handling 50 to 75% of the total cost of the business, and we have a responsibility to do that. So I think we're not there yet, but I think as we move in the next 5 or 6 years, you see more and more of the leaders in procurement moving on to big spots in their businesses. And then how do we drive innovation? You know, I've done it a couple ways. I've had innovation fairs. I kind of like the innovation fair idea where you bring people in, show them what you have, ask them for their ideas, promise them some business if they can give us, you know, ideas that help us grow business or build a strategy. But you know, the one thing I've seen that's really horrible is I've seen these companies have these innovation fairs, get the ideas in, never get back to the suppliers. Right? So when you're asking for a supplier to generate innovation and you set the stage for them to come in and give you innovation and then they get zero feedback, then they're not willing to do anything with you again. So I think if you're going to do something like an innovation fair and you're going to ask suppliers for ideas, within the first 4 weeks, you got to get back and say, this is a good idea, we're pursuing it. Not a good idea, it won't work in our business. And if you don't do that, you're doing yourself a disservice. The other thing is you've got to get all the stakeholders aligned, and really they've got to be definitely working with suppliers, because when you drive innovation, you're driving speed to market, and you're probably driving some revenue growth, and you're probably connecting with a supplier for the long term. So I think that's a really good thing. Now, I have another person that I know very well that went to his business and asked to set up a supplier innovation center, and this happens to be in the biotech area. Now, the company is Roche, and they actually did. They set up a center for innovation for suppliers so that suppliers and company personnel can work together, and the whole mission of each is to build innovation that results in a benefit for both companies. And so I think, you know, that's another thing that you can, you know, you really have to have the ear of the board of directors. You really have to have a good business plan to get it together, and then you have to deliver results. And I think in this case where they did it, there's actually a building and full-time teams working together, and all they're doing is doing that. So I think that's probably one of the more advanced cases of innovation. I think you need to ask suppliers for innovation. I think you need to challenge the supplier specifications. I think you need to work on getting more and more value from the supplier. And I think you have to make commitments to the supplier to get that innovation. So why do you get it first? How do you get exclusivity? How long does the exclusivity last? All of those things are important. In my career, I've had 3 or 4 suppliers bring in innovation. You know, I was working in a food company. We had bought a major product line from another food company, and when we were running it on the line, we only had 64% efficiency. And so one of the components was the closure on a jar. One of the components was a closure, and I happened to be working with a company that distributed that manufactured bourbon alcohol, and they came in and they looked at it, and they invited my CEO, the VP of Engineering, the VP of R&D, and me down. They took our product, they analyzed it. We had a problem. We were trying to put a shrink band on it. It was too small, didn't fit on the cap. They said, well, you just need to open it up a 1/4 inch and it'll fit on the cap. And then they had the technology, because they put tack stamps on, to be able to glue it on and make a perforation that would automatically open. And after we got done working with them and they gave us the equipment for our lines as a courtesy, because they were a supplier, our efficiency went up to 90%, maybe even 95%, way up. And that came from, you know, just taking the supplier on the line and working with the supplier on his component. He saw what was wrong with our product and fixed us. We had it fixed within 6 weeks. So we can drive innovation from procurement, but we have to ask for it. So with that, I don't see any other questions. Are there any other questions that people might have? That's my views on the questions that came in.
No, Bill, we did not get any questions yet.
Okay, then let's see. So that's my story, and if you have any questions, feel free to either write to Zycus, and Zycus can get them to me, and I will answer anybody's questions if you have additional questions.
Great. So thank you, Bill. We'll be sending the recording of this webinar to all attendees within the next 24 hours. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.